There were many who claimed devotion to Emperor Palpatine. The Inquisitorius swore their oaths. The Emperor's hands carried out his will. The dark-side adepts worshipped him as a master of an arcane power. Even the Imperial military bent its knee to the shadow of his throne. But among all of them, among every fanatic, every cultist, every Sith scholar, and every trembling servant who whispered his name in fear, there was one who surpassed them all. One who did not simply obey the Emperor, but gave himself to him fully. Body, mind, spirit, identity. This was not loyalty. This was not ambition. This was not the hunger for power that pulls most dark side followers into Palpatine's orbit. This was worship, pure, unbroken, and absolute. So complete was his devotion that Palpatine entrusted him with something he gave no other being in the galaxy. His very essence, his spirit, his life after death. When the Emperor of the Sith fell, this man became the vessel that carried his master's soul across the stars, not merely following the dark side, but becoming its chosen vessel, its host. His name is barely spoken in the modern era. His legend lies buried beneath wars, empires, and the rise of brand new orders. But to understand the true depth of Palpatine's reach, and the terrifying faith that one man held in him, you must know the story of the Emperor's most loyal servant, Jeng Droga, the last zealot of the Dark Empire, and the only follower that Palpatine ever trusted enough to inhabit. Before the Empire, before the psychic link, before he became the vessel of the Sith Emperor, Jeng Droga was a hunted creature, not hunted by criminals or bounty hunters, but by the Jedi themselves, because beings like him always left a trail. He was a Force-sensitive born without teaching, without guidance, a wild flame in the dark, and the wild flames draw in the Jedi Sentinels. Jedi Sentinels were the hunters of the Order, seekers and destroyer of the dark, those trained to track down dangerous Force-sensitives and artifacts before they can become a real threat. And on one fateful day, a Sentinel found Droga. What happened in the encounter has been lost to history, buried, because no Jedi Sentinel has survived long enough to report it. But the evidence remains. A yellow lightsaber stained by the dark side, carried by Jeng Droga for the rest of his life. It is the only record of this battle, a blade meant to defend the innocent, now wielded by a man who understood only instinct and violence. The Jedi Sentinel entered the wilderness to put down a growing danger and a predator, but he did not return, and from that moment on, the Force seemed to whisper, something is wrong with this dark Jedi. Droga became a shadow on forgotten planets, a wandering maverick, a self-taught duelist who fought not with discipline, but with overwhelming ferocity. He traveled with nothing but two blades, one Jedi yellow, one Sith red, symbols of a man walking between worlds, belonging to neither. His early life was a pilgrimage of survival, evading Jedi patrols who sensed something was off, but couldn't locate him, slipping through criminal syndicates who whispered about the dual-bladed butcher, and Force cults in the nameless corners of the galaxy. But every conflict made him stronger, every victory made him stranger. But beneath the chaos, beneath the bloodshed, there was a truth that Droga never understood. He was not growing, he was waiting. His power had no direction, his loyalty had no target, his rage had no purpose. He was a weapon with nowhere to aim. He was a blade that belonged to no master. And in that emptiness, the dark side stirred, because the Force knew something that Droga did not. One day he would not merely serve a master, he would carry one. A servant so hollow, so malleable, so instinctively devoted, that he would become the only being in history capable of holding the spirit of Emperor Palpatine himself. Droga wandered the void, unseen and nameless, until the moment the Emperor found him, and gave the weapon direction. Palpatine did not discover Droga by accident. The Emperor was a connoisseur of dark side potential. He could taste ambition, he smelled fear, and he sensed hunger. Most of the adepts that he encountered wanted something: power, rank, secrets, recognition, prestige. But Droga was different. When Sidious found him, he sensed no ambition, no ego, no future self demanding to be shaped. What he sensed was emptiness, a hollow vessel brimming with raw instinct, a man whose entire identity could be replaced with a single purpose. Droga was not a student waiting for a teacher, he was a weapon waiting for a target, and Sidious recognized that instantly. He was not an apprentice, he was a vessel. Other Emperor's hands were independent operators. Mara Jade was brilliant, cunning, a spy, an assassin with her own moral code. Lumaya sought destiny, legacy, power, and the Sith philosophy. The Inquisitorius tortured knowledge out of prisoners, the darkside adepts that chased occult secrets. All of them served Sidious with an expectation that they would grow, they would benefit, and they would rule. But Droga wanted nothing, and that is what made him priceless to the Emperor. To Palpatine, the perfect servant was not the strongest, it was the one who had no identity without his. When Sidious looked at Droga, he saw something utterly unique, a being whose entire sense of self could be shaped with a single command, a vessel, a future host, a weapon with a heartbeat, the psychic link. This was the ultimate form of trust. Sidious established a permanent psychic link with Droga, something he did with no other hand, no Inquisitor, no Adept, not even Vader. And while he had a less permanent one that he shared with Mara Jade, the calling of Jeng Droga was much more. The bond allowed him to see through his eyes, to speak into his mind, to direct him without words, to sense his emotions, to quiet his rage, and to fill the void inside of him with purpose. For Droga, the experience was transformative. The emptiness that had defined his entire life was suddenly filled with the Emperor's presence. For the first time, he felt calm, focused, directed, and even whole. This was not loyalty, it was a revelation. Jeng Droga did not see Palpatine as a master. He saw him as the answer to a life of confusion and isolation. The Emperor became his purpose, his identity, his entire faith. While other hands served the Empire, Droga served Sidious directly. He obeyed without hesitation, without ambition, and without even thought. If Sidious told Mara Jade to die, she would hesitate, maybe even fail to execute. If Sidious told Lumaya to die, she would bargain. If Sidious told another acolyte such as Steel to die, he would question him. But if Sidious told Droga to fall on his own blade, he would do so with zeal. That was the difference. The other hand served an emperor, but Droga served the dark side's chosen vessel. The others feared Sidious, but Droga feared only the absence of him. The others wanted power, and all he wanted was proximity. Palpatine did not need to manipulate him. He needed only to be present. Droga's philosophy was simple. There is no dark side without Palpatine. There is no purpose without his will. I exist because he commands it. Sidious made Droga the captain of the Emperor's shadow, his personal yacht, and more importantly, his fallback sanctuary when dealing with ancient powers, deep force rituals, and dangerous departures. Droga became the guardian of the Emperor's most valuable moments. He oversaw the other hands. He walked beside Palpatine into the tombs of Korriban, defying ancient spirits with nothing but his loyalty and his twin lightsabers. He was no longer the wandering berserker. He was now a hand sharpened by the will of the Emperor, and the most trusted blade in Sidious's arsenal. There are only a handful of moments in Star Wars Legends where Emperor Palpatine is genuinely threatened, not by rebels or by traitorous Moffs, and not even by Jedi, but by the ancient Sith themselves. Korriban is one of those moments. For Darth Sidious, the journey was meant to be a conquest of knowledge, a demonstration that he, the reigning Dark Lord, was the rightful heir to the most ancient tombs of the Order. But the ancient spirits that dwelled in Korriban's catacombs did not fear him, and they did not bend. When the Emperor demanded secrets of immortality from them, the spirits rose in fury, a storm of hatred and hunger older than the Republic. They assaulted him, crushed his defenses, and tore into his mind with the wrath of 1,000 dead tyrants. Palpatine, the Emperor, was overwhelmed, and that is when Jeng Droga made his decision. The Hollow Man charged forward alone. His twin blades lit the tombs in a violent gold and crimson. He didn't hesitate, he didn't falter, and he didn't fear. He didn't care that these were the greatest masters of the dark side. He only cared that his Emperor had been threatened. If the Emperor falls, I fall, and there is no life beyond his shadow. He grabbed his master and dragged him from the tomb, fighting off spirits no mortal should have been able to stand before, and he forced a retreat back to the Emperor's shadow. In one of the few recorded times in the entire Dark Empire era, Palpatine's life was saved by another being's hand. Darth Sidious never admitted fear, but after Korriban, he knew that this man was indispensable. In the days that followed, Palpatine entrusted Droga with missions that no other hand would ever learn existed, including one that would forever redefine his fate. The journey to Byss, and the Emperor's greatest secret, the perfection of his cloned bodies. The moment that would lead to Droga becoming not just Palpatine's greatest servant, but his future body. In the year 4 ABY, as the Battle of Endor raged, most of the galaxy believed that the Emperor stood untouchable on the second Death Star, an immortal tyrant presiding over the collapse of the rebellion. But Jeng Droga knew better. He had felt the Emperor's presence through their psychic link. For years, this was a constant quiet thunder in the back of his mind, a heartbeat that was not his own, a shadow that filled the emptiness inside of him. Droga was stationed in the Yushan sector when the heartbeat suddenly changed. It faltered, stuttered, wavered, and then it stopped. Just silence followed, a silence so total that it shattered him. The psychic collapse. Across the stars, Droga screamed. His crew of the Emperor's Shadow watched in terror as the captain, usually calm, obedient, even sedated, the most stable of Sidious's servants, fell into a violent, feral convulsion. He felt Sidious die, not metaphorically or symbolically, but literally through their mental link. To Droga, it wasn't the Emperor's death. It was the death of himself and his purpose. In one breath, the purpose that had filled him dissolved. The presence that anchored his mind vanished. The silence pressed into his skull like a vacuum. Something inside of the man split open, and then he snapped. The berserker unleashed, and Droga seized the nearest crew member, crushing his windpipe with his bare hand. His dual blades erupted in red and yellow fire. The bridge became a slaughterhouse. Every officer, navigator, and technician became instant prey. This was not a normal rage. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't vengeance. It was instinct. A wounded predator thrashing in the dark, lashing out at the universe that had taken his master from him indiscriminately. The Emperor's Shadow spiraled out of control, alarms howling, systems failing, as its captain tore his crew apart in the dim red light. And then the ship fell into the atmosphere of the world of Cal. Droga did not try to save it. He didn't try to escape. He no longer cared. He wanted one thing, to be anywhere his master's presence might be found. The ship plunged into the ocean, but Droga survived. Barely. But something followed him there. The Emperor's spirit arrived. Palpatine had not died. His body had perished, but his consciousness, the twisted knot of hatred, hunger, and will that was Darth Sidious, refused to scatter. It traveled through the Force, seeking the nearest vessel that it trusted. And there, it finally found Droga. The Emperor's spirit entered him like a storm of knives. A torrent of dark energy slammed into his mind, fusing with his nervous system, filling every corner of him with burning malice and psychic pressure. He screamed, but this time not in grief, but in possession. But for Droga, this was the highest honor imaginable, and the most agonizing torture that he could endure. With Sidious inside of him, his sanity frayed even further. His purpose returned, but in a twisted, distorted, evil form. He rose from the wreckage of the Emperor's Shadow, a vessel of pure dark energy, and then he began the long, delirious journey to Byss. The process to remove him took years. Saint Pestage, Palpatine's most loyal vizier, slowly extracted the Emperor's consciousness from Droga's body and mind, transferring him into a waiting clone. In the end though, Droga had done something that no other being in the galaxy could have. He brought the Emperor back from the grave, and Palpatine would never forget it. When the clone's eyes opened on Byss, shining with the unmistakably cold fire, Jeng Droga felt his soul reorder itself, and the galaxy snap back into place. Years of wandering in the deep core in silence, years of praying to hear his master's voice, years of sleeping beside the wreckage of the Emperor's Shadow, all of it ended, and Palpatine had returned. The Emperor lived. This was not science or sorcery. It was absolution, a sign that his devotion had never been misplaced. For the first time since Endor, his mind was at peace. But something else formed inside of his mind. The knowledge that his master could die. He had felt Sidious's death once already. He had felt the psychic link snap like a bone. He had felt the universe go hollow. And now that he had seen the Emperor restored, that fear only grew stronger. The fear of losing him again. And then the clones began to fail, and the fear turned to rage. When the new clone bodies began to decay, Droga sensed his master slipping, his cells collapsing, his flesh rotting, life unraveling faster and faster with each transfer. And then came the truth. Some within the Emperor's own circle had sabotaged the clones. The fear that had haunted Droga hardened into something savage. He had carried Sidious' spirit once, he had nearly died, and now others, lesser unworthy, had dared to shorten the life of Palpatine again. But before he could enact his vengeance, expose them, and destroy them, Palpatine made his final decision. "My lord, do not go." The last clone was dying, sabotaged beyond repair. The Emperor's time was ending. In desperation, Sidious revealed his final plan. He would take the body of the infant Anakin Solo, a child, a vessel too fragile to contain him. But Droga fell to one knee and begged, "Do not go. Let me retrieve the child." But Sidious's response was cold, weakened by decay. "There is nothing in the galaxy that I fear." And those were the last words that Droga ever heard from his Emperor. When the Jedi dragged Sidious's spirit into the Netherworld, Droga felt the moment of death as if his own mind were being torn apart. The link shattered again. The voice vanished. The universe went cold. But this time, he was weaponized, and he began his crusade of vengeance. Droga rose with a new purpose: avenge the Emperor. He tracked the Imperial conspirators with a single-minded fury. He put a 100,000 credit bounty on Sarkev Quest. He hunted him across Nar Shaddaa, chased him across the core, and finally, when a bounty hunter dragged him to his knees, Droga did not speak. He simply killed the traitor. His vengeance was complete, and Droga returned to Cal, to the place where he had once held the Emperor's soul, hoping to feel his presence again. He lived like a pilgrim among ruins, waiting for the miracle to repeat. Years passed, and then, 12 long years later, a whisper reached him. The Emperor lives, and Jeng Droga followed, straight into the Second Imperium, straight into illusion, straight into the final fury. The whisper led him into a rising movement calling itself the Second Imperium. It had everything a loyalist wanted: Imperial banners, Darksiders trained in the Emperor's name, Night Sisters promising resurrection, the Shadow Academy forging Dark Jedi, and holograms of the Emperor declaring a new era. To warriors, administrators, and zealots, it looked like the rebirth of everything that they had lost. And to Droga, it felt like a second chance. He entered their ranks not as a recruit, but as a believer, as someone returned to his rightful throne beside his master. A symbol of the Emperor's chosen, they handed him legions of Darksiders to command. But there was one thing that they did not know. Jeng Droga had met the real Palpatine. He had carried Sidious's spirit. He knew the dark voice of the true master better than any of them. And as the weeks passed, the voice never returned. Not a whisper, not a flicker, not a ripple in the bond that he once shared. At first he ignored the doubt. His mind refused to accept it. But then he saw things, imperfections, inconsistencies, moments where the supposed Emperor spoke with the wrong cadence, mistimed emotion, and a human softness that Sidious never possessed. Droga confronted their leader Brachus, pressed him, demanded answers, and the explanation was horrifying. The Emperor of the Second Imperium was an elaborate illusion, a projected figurehead engineered to gather loyalists, to rally Darksiders, and to rebuild the Empire's shattered remnant. It was not a resurrection, it was a scam. A hologram deceiving the faithful, a mockery of his master's image. And when Droga understood, truly understood, the psychic dam inside of him shattered. His mind decayed fully. Not only was his master gone, his memory had been weaponized to manipulate the Empire on the desperate fringes. The moment the truth settled, Droga's mind fractured the same way it had the moment Sidious died at Endor. His twin lightsabers snapped to life, gold and red in a storm of motion. He turned on the Darksiders around him, Night Sisters, Renegade Inquisitors, Shadow Academy trainees, cutting through them with the ferocity of a wounded animal. This was not even vengeance anymore. This was a wild primal force that lost its only tether to sanity. He charged into the Third Battle of Yavin, slaughtering everything near him, friend, foe, Darksider, Imperial, searching for something he could kill that would silence the truth clawing his mind apart. The Jedi felt him before they saw him. He was a storm of hate, a mind cracked by devotion, a blade master in full collapse. And among the Jedi defenders of the Praxium, one warrior moved to intercept him, the Jedi Battlemaster Kyle Katarn. Katarn had faced many Dark Warriors, Sith Adepts, Shadow Academy killers, Night Sisters, Inquisitors, but none of them fought like Droga. Droga was a being with nothing left to lose, a weapon without its master, a soul severed from its anchor. He struck at the Battlemaster with Jarkai's precision, every blow fueled by grief, every move sharpened by decades of service. Katarn tried to reach him, tried to speak, tried to calm the storm, but Droga was beyond words. There was only the void where the Emperor's voice had once been, and so Kyle Katarn did the only thing that he could. He ended it. A final, decisive strike, clean and efficient, merciful. The gold and red blades dimmed, and Jeng Droga collapsed. The last true fanatic of the Dark Empire. The one man who served Sidious not for power, but because there was nothing else that he wanted to live for. In the end, he died as he lived, faithful, tormented, and utterly bound to the Emperor. This is the tragedy of a man who loved something that could never love him back. A servant who outlasted his master and could not bear the silence. In the end, Jeng Droga stands as something unique in Star Wars Legends. He didn't just serve Palpatine, he loved him. Not in a sentimental sense, but in the total consuming way a fanatic loves a god. Droga saved Palpatine's life more than nearly any other being recorded. And behind the scenes, he is one of the most important dark-side figures in the entire Dark Empire era. A vessel for the Emperor's spirit. A fanatic whose devotion exceeded even that of any of the Hands, the Inquisitors, and the Royal Guard. To Jeng Droga, Palpatine wasn't a Sith Lord climbing to godhood. He already was one. The dark side didn't own him. Destiny didn't guide him. It was the other way around. Droga saw the Emperor the way Palpatine wanted every being in the galaxy to see him, as the center of it all, the architect of fate, and the only thing worth living or dying for. And when that god finally vanished forever, Droga followed him into the dark, because there was nothing left inside him that belonged to Jeng Droga. Only the echo of a voice that was now gone. So let me ask you, was Jeng Droga the ultimate dark side devotee, or the greatest cautionary tale of what happens when someone loves the Sith more than they love themselves? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.